was in the Marines at a very, very young age. Then the big question comes from Captain Fritz. He simply says, "Lee, did you shoot the president?" And Oswald answered, "No, I emphatically deny that." And he says, "Did you shoot the officer in Oak Cliff?" Oswald answers, "No, I deny that too." There's no question he shot the officer at Oak Cliff. You see what I'm saying? Well, at this point, Hosty can't take it anymore. Gets upset, and he wants answers to his questions, and he says to Captain Fritz, ask him if he's ever been to Mexico City. So Fritz calmly asks Oswald, "Have you ever been to Mexico City?" Oswald replies, "Yeah, I've been to Mexico when I was in the Marine Corps." And Hosty then clarifies that he meant Mexico City, not just Mexico. And Oswald's reply was, "What makes you think I've been to Mexico City? I've never been there." Well, now Hosty knows he's lying. Why? He's got the letter that he wrote saying he was there. So now he knows he's a liar. Okay? Well, suddenly, just when Hosty's about to really put it on him and get some information, a police officer walks in and tells Captain Fritz that the first lineup is ready. Anybody know what a lineup is? Okay? You have a witness that's going to pick somebody out of a lineup. Okay? Who do you think is going to be the first witness to try to pick Oswald out of a lineup?
The guy that was murdered.
Not yet.
The
Who?
lady.
Helen Markham, the one that saw him shoot the police officer. So, the first lineup, before Lee Harvey Oswald, this is really kind of weird. Before they bring him into the first lineup, they search him for the first time. You'd have thought they'd have searched him when they brought him into the police department. All they did is look in his wallet. So before this first lineup, they search Lee Harvey Oswald for the first time, and this is what they find on his possession. Now this one's key, and we'll talk about later. That thing I passed around that had the second ID, did you see that bus transfer ticket on the top? Okay, he had a bus transfer ticket that would transfer him only 2 blocks from where Tippit was killed, which tells you that when he was walking down the road, he was 2 blocks from getting on a bus to go somewhere, because he had a transfer ticket. Does that make sense? Keep that in mind. So, he had a bus transfer to a bus station that was only 2 blocks away from where Tippit was shot. If Tippit doesn't catch him in that 2 blocks, he probably never runs into him because he's on a bus somewhere. And that's going to be key later on. In his wallet, he had $13.87 in cash. He had his Marine Corps ring, and he had 5 live rounds of .38 caliber ammunition in his left trouser pocket, which matched the gun that he shot Tippit with. So there you go again. Well, they marched Lee Harvey Oswald to the first lineup. The 3rd floor hallways are just full of hundreds of reporters. So they got to walk him through there, okay? And we'll show you some footage on that. Well, at 4:30 p.m., Oswald's first lineup consists of himself and 3 other individuals. Now, I'll give you some side notes on this. Usually, who would you use in your lineups in a jail? Who would you use as the one that you're wondering about, but then you got to have 3 other dummies, so to speak? What people would you normally use for that? What's that? Well, maybe. You might not have lookalikes. Similar, but what type, who would you probably take in there? Who would be the other 3? Other prisoners. Exactly right. Exactly right. Well, they were short on prisoners during that day. They didn't have that many people arrested. So they grabbed police officers and had them take off their ties and go in casual. And Oswald objected to that because he thought he stuck out like a sore thumb in comparison to these other 3. Very bright guy, very paranoid, very thinking that everybody was against him. Well, anyway, these lineups were kind of weird in those days because the people would stand here and there would be this incredibly bright floodlight that would be in your eyes so you couldn't see the person that was out there. And Helen Markham was very nervous, thinking that this guy that she saw shot Tippit would know who she was, and was scared. But they assured her that he wouldn't be able to see, and the lights were so bright they wouldn't. Okay? Well, At 4:35 p.m., Oswald's put in position number 2. You know, they got him 1, 2, 3, 4, and he's in number 2, and there's a 2 above him, and a 1 above the other guy, and a 3, and a 4. And Helen Markham was brought into the room. As soon as she saw the 4 men in the lineup, she began to cry. Absolutely started crying, and pointed at number 2, which was Oswald, and said without a doubt, that was the guy she saw shoot the police officer. Okay, that's lineup number 1. Well, let's go back to the Payne residence and talk about this a little bit. Why would the police go back out to the Payne residence? What are they going to be looking for at 4:50 p.m.? It's in your notes, but they're going to look for a rifle, see if this guy owned a rifle. Okay, if he had a rifle and it was there, would that take him off the hook or make him more guilty? If he has a rifle there. Take him off the hook, right? But they go out there at 4:50, out to Ruth Payne's house in Irving. They're looking for a rifle that might be owned by Lee Harvey Oswald. So police get there and they ask Marina if Lee owned a rifle, and she acknowledged that he did. When they asked her, well, where does he keep this rifle? She said he keeps it in the garage wrapped up in a blanket. Well, Mrs. Payne was shocked. She was very conservative. Would have never allowed a weapon in her house if she'd have known about it. And she's upset because she doesn't know that Lee Harvey Oswald was storing a rifle in her garage. Well, anyway, Marina and Mrs. Payne escort the police officers out to the garage, and there's the blanket, just like she thought it would be, lying on the floor. The problem was, when one of the police officers went over to pick up the blanket, it just folded over the top of his arm, which meant there was no rifle in the blanket. Now, since there's no rifle found belonging to Lee Harvey Oswald at the Payne residence, the police are now going to try to connect the rifle found on the 6th floor of the school book depository to the missing rifle from Mrs. Payne's garage. Now, I will give you another side note. At this time, Marina Oswald, when she saw that rifle was not in the blanket, for the first time thought to herself, I wonder if my husband was involved in this crime. She began to wonder at that point if he could have been involved, because she fully expected that rifle to be there. Well, at 5:45 p.m., Captain Fritz radios those police at the Payne residence and asks them to bring both Marina and Mrs. Payne to police headquarters because they want to question them. And Captain Fritz is especially interested to see if Marina could identify the rifle. They got the rifle, right? So they're going to say, hey, Marina, is this the rifle that your husband has had wrapped in the blanket in the garage? That's the idea behind it. Well, the police pick up Marina and Mrs. Payne. They escort them back to police headquarters. Now, this is crucial because you're going to get a chance to really hear some history here in the future. Well, just before they depart to take Mrs. Payne and Marina to police headquarters, a neighbor, Lenny Mae Randall, appears and asks to talk with police officers. And she informs police officers that her brother, Buell Wesley Frazier, had taken Lee Harvey Oswald to work the day of the president's assassination. Now, I'm going to tell you the story on Buell Frazier. He's a very good friend of mine. Matter of fact, my adult class just talked to him on the phone for an hour the other day, and you're going to have the same opportunity later. But Buell lived with his sister. He was just 19 years old. And he lived with his sister, Lenny Mae Randall, and her family because he had such a poor relationship with his stepfather. Very, very abusive. So Buell was just 19 years old, lived with his sister in Irving. Now, Mrs. Payne's house was only a half a block away from the Randall residence. Just kind of keep that in mind. And generally what happened is Oswald didn't have a license. He couldn't drive. And he would either walk from his boarding house on 1026 North Beckley to the school book depository, or generally he would get on the bus and take a ride over there. Well, Frazier worked with Oswald at the Texas School Book Depository, and on Friday nights he would give him a ride to Mrs. Payne's house, where Oswald would spend the weekend with his wife and his children trying to reconcile their marriage. And then on Monday, he would come up and pick Lee Harvey Oswald up and take him to work. Does that make sense? And this went on for 3 weeks. Okay? Now, Lenny Mae Randall stated that on the morning of November 22nd, excuse me, 1963, she was looking out of her kitchen window and her brother's car was parked under the carport next to the house. I gave you a handout showing you that carport. I think it's, you can just kind of get an idea if you care. Okay, here's the house, there's the carport. Okay, now what she testifies to the police there at Mrs. Payne's residence is that when she looked out the kitchen window, she noticed Lee Harvey Oswald placing an item wrapped in brown paper in the back of her brother's car. And she stated the package was placed in the car and was about 2 feet long. She witnessed that. Now let me reframe and kind of let you know what the story was. Normally, Lee Harvey Oswald got a ride from Buell Frazier on Friday nights. Okay? Spent the weekend, brought him back on Monday. What's the difference between November 22nd, 1963? What day of the week is that? It's a Friday, which means that Oswald came home to Irving, so to speak, on a Thursday. Now, when he asked Buell Frazier Thursday night, the 21st, hey, will you give me a ride home? Not, will you give me a ride to the Payne residence? First question out of Buell's mouth was what? Well, gee, Lee, it's not Friday. How come you're going on Thursday night? And he said, well, Marina made me some curtains for my boarding house windows, and I'm going to Mrs. Payne's to pick up some curtain rods so I can hang them up in my boarding house. If you were Buell Wesley Frazier, would that seem odd to you? Not really, right? So he gives him a ride. Well, normally, Buell Frazier would come down and pick Oswald up in the morning and drive him back. Well, that Friday morning, Buell was running a little late. He was eating his breakfast. Oswald didn't know what the deal was. So Oswald, for the first time, walked down to the Randall residence and waited for Buell to come out. Well, as he was waiting for Buell to come out, what did he do? He took his package and put it in the back seat of the car, right? And Lenny Ray Randall stated to the police that she saw that. Now, when Oswald stood there and wait, and then Buell Frazier came out, what was the first thing Buell probably asked Oswald when he saw that package in the back of his car? Gee, Lee, what is that? He says, don't you remember? Those are the curtain rods I told you I was going to pick up at Mrs. Payne's residence. What would Buell's thought be? Okay. So he drives him back to the Texas School Book Depository. They get out of the car. Buell had an older car. He was concerned about the battery, having problems with the battery going dead, so he stayed there and revved the car up a little bit more to get the battery charged up. And Oswald went his own way and carried that package into the Texas School Book Depository. Okay, so there's kind of a combination of the two things. Well, Ruth Payne interviews with the Dallas police, and she told the Dallas police that she had returned home from shopping the afternoon of November 21st, 1963, which was a Thursday, and she was very surprised to see Lee and Marina sitting on the lawn playing with the children because he didn't normally come home on Thursday. He came home on Friday. Now, according to Mrs. Payne, Marina felt very awkward and embarrassed that Lee had arrived unannounced and without permission to be there during the week. Mrs. Payne also stated that the evening of November 21st, Thursday night, she went to the garage looking for some paint to decorate some wooden blocks that she had made for her children. And Mrs. Payne stated that she noticed a light was left on and assumed Lee had been in the garage forgetting to turn the light off. Mrs. Payne did not get an opportunity to talk to Oswald about the light that evening, as he was already in bed, and she stated that Lee Harvey Oswald was very quiet that night at dinner and went to bed earlier in the evening. She also stated that Oswald left 3 specific items in the bedroom before his departure the next morning. A majority of his money, about $170, which would be probably $2,000 or $3,000 in today's money. A lot of money for Lee Harvey Oswald to have, $170. This is key. He left his wedding ring in a cup on the dresser. And he left a note for Marina to get some new shoes for Junie, his oldest daughter. She had just given birth to Rachel, the second daughter, and he left a note. Now think about that. He left a majority of his money, $170, which was probably $2,000 or $3,000 in today's money. Took $13.87 with him, right? He left his wedding ring in a cup on the dresser. They were married in Russia. The tradition, he had a Russian wedding ring. Wedding rings in Russia are worn on the right hand, not the left. And it is absolutely the worst luck ever, according to Russian tradition, to ever take your wedding ring off. So what is Lee Harvey Oswald saying when he leaves the majority of his money and his wedding ring at that morning when he left? Probably not coming back. Just keep that in mind. Well, the morning of November 22nd, 1963, Mrs. Payne was not up when Lee Harvey Oswald left for work at the school book depository. And that same morning, I'm going to repeat this, Buell Frazier happened to be running late. Because he was running late, Lee Harvey Oswald chose to walk the half block down to the Randall residence for his Monday morning ride. When Buell Frazier got into his car with Oswald about 7:20 a.m., he noticed the brown package in the back seat of the car and asked Oswald what it was. Oswald answered that the package contained curtain rods for new curtains that Marina had made for him for his boarding house room. Buell Frazier thought nothing of it and drove the two to work that day at the Texas School Book Depository. Now, I'm going to show you a very short video, and we'll end with that today. And this is Buell Frazier in today's time telling you about that experience.